what America was and what it can become. This is Liberty Town Hall.
And welcome to Liberty Town Hall. Today we're discussing property rights. Inflation, do you really own your property? All these things tied together into our monetary policies and what the government is allowing us or not allowing us to do with our own property. You guys, Ken and Tom, say that the government's doing stuff that they shouldn't be allowed to do by law. So let me ask you, we were talking a little bit earlier off camera about the Swamplands Act and how that come into play, where the federal government had actually sold the land to the state.
They gave the land
back.
They gave the land back to the state.
Yes.
Under an act of Congress. It was granted back to the state. The state then was able to grant that land to an owner.
So now Ken owns his land.
Now Ken owns his land.
Right.
Because it was granted and it was patented by the state, not the federal government, but the state of Michigan, in this case, we'll use Michigan, gave the property, sold the property to Ken.
Okay. So
Ken, under a mandate under the Swamplands Act, was mandated to go ahead and drain and make that fertile and prosperous.
Well, the DEQ isn't going to like that.
Well, they may not like it, but that's exactly what they had to do.
So the federal government give land back to the states that was swampland in this particular case, with the sole intention of the state selling that to raise revenue, with the instructions that if you bought it, you had to drain it. That was the rule.
Yeah, you had to improve it by draining it.
You had to improve it by draining it.
So you could utilize it.
So that was the whole pretense of you buying it.
Correct.
Okay.
And then when that happened, the state, I'll use an analogy that we talked about a little bit ago. If you go to buy a refrigerator at Best Buy or one of these places, right?
Right, so it's my refrigerator now.
It's your refrigerator.
Absolutely.
You take it home. You plug it in. Does the manufacturer of that refrigerator have the right to come into your home on your private property, fill it full of gedunks or whatever they're going to put in it, and then utilize it? No, they don't have.
Because they sold it to me and it's mine.
It's yours. It's your property. The state gave up all right, title, and interest in that property when it was given to Ken. Period. It's gone. They have no right, title, or interest.
No. So you're saying if we go back to the original land deeds and patents and follow this through, you should be able to drain that swamp.
Yeah, the law is linear. It's not skewed. We live in a skewed land. They've skewed the law.
Well, we're going to talk about how the federal government and the state governments have skewed the law when we return right after these messages with more Liberty Town Hall.
Are you a small business reaching out to a national audience or an established company seeking more exposure? Place your ad on Liberty Town Hall and reach up to 46 million homes nationwide. Call now for a quote.
And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. We're joined by Ken Thompson and Tom Dunn. Guys, this is so interesting, yet it's so concerning because basically it comes down to we don't own our land underneath the pretenses we purchased it under.
It's color of law.
Color of law, okay? So taxes are out of control on it. Inflationary prices have gone up. We can't build or do anything on our land without permission from some governmental agency now.
And that's a contract.
And that's a contract again, right? So when we trace our lineage back on this land, how does the landowner actually say, wait a minute, time out. This isn't what the land was bought underneath the assumption of. Like we were talking earlier, if you went and bought a car underneath the pretenses that the car's all there, runs good, you go out and you kick the tires, you check it all over, and you say, yeah, I want to buy that car. But then when you buy it, after you get the title in your name, then you find out there's no engine and transmission, that you really didn't get what you paid for. So you're not really in ownership of that whole car, you're only part of it. So you can't really use it for what it was intended for,
well,
right?
Let's take another little analogy and say that Michigan is a public land state, all right?
What does that mean,
Out
public
west.
land state? Michigan's a public land state versus other states that are not a public land
Well,
state?
the original,
how does that work?
Well, the original 13 states were wards of the king.
Yes.
They were granted by the king. And when
Well, we took them.
yeah, and then we basically nationalized the land.
Yes.
The states did in their sovereignty, in their individual sovereignty, and collectively they took over the land from the king.
State, not the individual people.
The people took the land
Underneath the name of the state.
within the name of the state.
Okay.
Within the name, not
Okay.
under, within. And then the people came together to protect that right to form the polity of the state.
Okay.
And then the polity of the state came together under the Articles of Confederation Perpetual Union to form a common bound amongst the 13 states so they could protect what they
Which
did.
led to the Constitution.
Correct.
Correct.
To give better control. Now, the land itself is yours. But if I can construct a transparency over that land and convince you you have to play in my transparency, then I've subverted what is yours. And this is what they, being the governmental structure, has successfully done. And this started back literally during the days of the Revolutionary War, the Civil War. For on any given day, depending upon what army was in town, determined who owned the land. If the Loyalists came into town and you were a rebel, you lost the land. If the rebels came to town and you were a loyalist, you lost the land. And at the cessation of hostilities under the Treaty of Peace, one of the most important parts was settling the debts and ownership of the land. For there were loyalists who still had land in the states who lost it to the rebels, and there were rebels who lost the land of the loyalists who were still in the states. So part of the Treaty of Paris 1783 was to settle the ownership of the land. Now, here's the kicker. In order to settle the ownership of the land, the various states passed laws for the courts of chancery. It said if you're on the land, register your position in the court of chancery. So if there was a loyalist in London who lost the land, they could then apply under the Treaty of Peace to be settled for their loss of the land, i.e. paid for it.
Right.
So there was knowledge of ownership and propriety of the ownership. And you register the land not for the protection of the state, but to substantiate your ownership of that land. The entitlement of the land, the ownership, not the entitlement, I don't want to use that word. Now, the problem is over time, they started using that registration to their advantage, to your disadvantage.
How so?
The assessment rolls.
So now they can just make up any value they want on the property.
Right.
And you have to pay tax on somebody else saying what it's worth.
Right. Because
where
as
that
a
come from.
public land state in Michigan, all land was originally in the hands of the government, whether it be the Fed or the state. In this case, it was the federal exclusively under the Northwest Territory statute of 1787.
So Virginia didn't even own it at that point. The state or the federal government
the
did.
federal was surrendered the rights to the federal government.
Okay.
Now, we're a public land state, so you battle your way up from the Grand River in my home county, Ionia, and you stake your land. You go down to the office, pay for it, they give you the patent, there's your quadrant of land.
And that's the fee.
And that's the fee. One time
the fee.
fee, you're done. You got
That's
it.
the
Done.
fee.
That's your
Okay.
fee simple.
Yep.
So you don't own the land anymore, really, because if you don't pay property tax, then you lose it. So
Well,
you're really renting it now. That's
Well,
what it's come
they've
down
turned
to.
us into serfs,
Okay.
statutory serfs. And they've done it because we've allowed it. We have to hold government
How do
accountable.
we not allow it anymore then?
You have to learn how to walk into the jurisdiction of the state and tell them, I'm my own subject matter.
But there's a lot of smart lawyers out there. If they could get people out of paying property tax, don't you think the lawyers would have filed this in court by now?
No, because I disagree with smart lawyers. What do they always say? 10%, 90% of the lawyers give 10% a bad name. And unfortunately,
I think it's probably 95. but-
yeah, by now it is. We have been miseducated, well-designed miseducation, where they've created where the state is omnipotent and we are subject to the state, i.e. property taxes. And when you go into Article 9 of the, Article 9 of the state constitution, you see conjunctions of words, i.e. real and personal. That's
Right.
one subject.
Right.
Yet they only send you the real bill. Where's the personal tax bill?
Well, I can tell you, as a business and a person that has to pay personal property tax all the time, there's even an ongoing, like if I went and I bought a refrigerator or anything, I have to pay a sales tax when I buy it, and then I have to pay a use tax every year that's equal to the sales tax.
Where in the Constitution is it written that the state can command you to pay ad infinitum for the use of an item. It's a use tax. It's not a property tax.
Right.
It's an ad valorem tax.
Well, I guarantee you, these states claim use tax very much because is what they say. Although we can't charge a tax for buying something out of state across state lines, we don't pay tax when we do that. And the internet's really brought this around where people are shipping goods across state lines. So let's say I bought envelopes for my business in Chicago and I shipped them here to Michigan and I mailed them out to my customers. I would have to pay a use tax on those envelopes because I didn't pay a sales tax to Illinois. So I have to pay a Michigan use tax.
Taxes are no longer used for revenue. They're simply not within the state. They're used for coercion. They're used for monopolistic socialism, is what it is. It's not even capitalism anymore.
So
it's
socialism, Marxism, this all comes into play.
Yes.
We're going to have to pick this up when we return with more Liberty Town Hall after these messages. And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. Ken, Tom, I'm still frustrated in trying to figure out, okay, if the law doesn't support what's happening, what do we do about it? I personally can't stop paying my taxes because they'll take the land. If I don't pay my use tax, they'll take my business kind of mentality. The courts have held up one case law after another case law after another case law until the original law, as you got right here printed in front of you, is ignored now. So really, what do we really do? Is this a losing battle to say that, we're just renting property now and call it good? I mean, is there any way to win this battle, guys?
Well, there's not an easy, there's no easy solution other than, I believe, education.
Okay, and
history.
That's what we're doing.
What
educating.
we're trying to do.
We're trying to get people back.
And we
history.
kind of bounce around a little bit here, back and forth, and it all boils back down that if we have the education, we take the time as men and women to educate ourselves, to learn what our history is and what the history of property is.
I feel like I'm in the Matrix where you take the red pill or the blue pill, and whether you go down the hole and see how far it goes, or you wake up in your cot the next morning and everything's still just great and hunky-dory and Obama's the greatest president in the world.
Well, you're dealing with...
Okay, I swallowed the blue pill. I went down the rabbit hole. I went and I looked up for myself and said, wow, we really are in a matrix here.
Yeah.
But what do we do?
You have to learn... You got to learn how to stand flat on the land. And you have to know in your own individual self how to challenge and expose the wrongs. Government is not there to protect us.
But the government is so big now and so powerful and is entrenched in every aspect of our lives.
Well, that's what's wrong.
That free America doesn't exist anymore. So what do we do?
Free America does exist.
No, it doesn't. You're taxed just to be an American now. The health care bill eliminated that. You don't own your land no more because you have to pay property tax every year, so you're just renting your land.
Then
you can't build on your property. You can't do anything without the permission of the government.
Then you have to build a revolt. And the revolt is constituted in the Constitution. It's constituted in the fundamental law of our republic, and was constituted by the founding fathers of the state of Michigan, who did revolt.
If you stood up to the government will kill you.
No, they didn't. They didn't revolt. They didn't kill them in the Frostbite Convention. And if you read the words of John C. Calhoun on the Federal Senate in January of 1837, he called the actions of the Frostbite Convention revolting and revolutionary, because they overthrew the will of the constructed government of its day.
John Adams said the American Revolution was actually enacted long before the shots were fired. It was the change in the hearts and the minds and the will of the people. That was the real American Revolution.
Yes.
And then what we have to do is to make sure that each individual man and woman can see that when they understand their property rights, things seem to open up.
But we're of a mob rule country now. We are no longer a republic. We are a mob
We're still
rule.
a republic.
No, we're not.
They haven't changed that.
Not when more than half the country is on the welfare dole. I mean, food stamps, tax returns beyond what they got. There's no refund that you can get that's more than you got, and that's what's happening.
The statistical number is a third, really.
Well, even a
but
third.
not counting the 25 to 30 million undocumented people.
Do you know how many people got Obama
yeah.
phones in the last few years? I mean, come on.
I hear more than one. I didn't get mine.
Well,
Or mine.
so you really now have more people that are saying they like the system, they want it to continue, and the few people that are paying the bills are becoming a dwindling number. So
you suffer the insufferable due to your ignorance.
Okay.
And there is no better slave than those who think themselves free, and that's our problem. And we have to start literally in our own backyard. It starts in Michigan. It starts in the township government. It is the township government who is, by our state constitution, an alter ego of the state legislature.
Well, we're talking about property, land property,
right,
in particular, but this goes into all of our property, whether
yes.
it's the desk that we're sitting at here.
Yes.
For example, this desk, I have to pay tax on this desk every single year. So in a very real way, I'm renting this desk, even though I went and bought it. Now I went and bought it to rent it.
You're a physical serf. We have lost continuity. We have lost our history. We have been literally, street parlance, lied to. And we believe, i.e. at large, we believe the lie to be the truth. So I come along and tell you your truth is a lie. Who's crazy?
Me.
And they feed upon that. And we just saw the big lie win here on November 7th. It was the big lie that won. They spent $1 billion to construct that big lie. And it was rhetorically beat in where we watch these elected leaders on both sides of the aisle. This isn't to one side or the other.
Neither side of the aisle talked about the Federal Reserve.
Correct.
And what most people don't know is the Federal Reserve has a 100-year charter that was signed into law by Woodrow Wilson back in 1913.
Yep.
Which means it's up in 2013. And we just went through a big campaign, one of the most expensive in history, billions of dollars spent between both sides here, and not one of them said, wait a minute, guys, the Federal Reserve's charter is up for renewal. This private company that's controlling all of our money that we've been paying literally hundreds of billions of dollars a year to interest to, $500 billion last year in interest alone that we're giving to this private company, and nobody talked about it. Why? Because they don't want the system changed. And now you're talking about basically saying, I own my land, you can't tell me what to do with it. This is my land, I followed it from the original patent all the way through the deed process, everything that we got, it's all there, it's my land, you can't tell me what to do on it. And you think that's gonna go over? You don't think big government's gonna come in here, take you off that land, pull it from you, fine you, and arrest you for building something that you shouldn't have?
They're going to try, but again, regardless of what they try to impose upon us, and they do try to, through the transparency of the artful language of statutory words, we have the standing to challenge it and overcome it. And it takes knowledge, and you're not going to gain knowledge when you hire somebody else to do something they don't understand for you.
Well, when we come back after these messages, we're going to talk about exactly what you should do to protect your own rights, and where does it actually start? What's the first thing you can do? That's what we'll be asking when we come right back.
Are you a small business reaching out to a national audience or an established company seeking more exposure? Place your ad on Liberty Town Hall and reach up to 46 million homes nationwide. Call now for a quote.
And welcome back. Where we left off, we were talking about what individuals can do themselves. What should we do?
Personal education.
Education.
Understanding our rights and knowing our rights. Wouldn't you say, Ken?
Correct. We have the ability to have a peacefully constructed constitutional revolt within the law.
A peaceful revolt, stand up and say,
right,
we want the law upheld.
Correct.
Are we a nation of laws or a nation of will?
Right.
Of specialized people, right?
We're a moral people. Our Constitution was designed for God-fearing people. We got to put the fear of God back in government and back in the hands of the people.
When the people are afraid of the government, that's tyranny. When the government's afraid of the people, that's liberty.
That's liberty.
And that's where we concluded today on Liberty Town Hall.
All the property that is necessary to a man for the conservation of the individual and the propagation of the species is his natural right, which none can justly deprive him of. But all property superfluous to such purposes is the property of the public, who by their laws have created it, and who may therefore by other laws dispose of it. Whenever the welfare of the public shall demand such disposition, he that does not like civil society on these terms, let him retire and live among the savages. He can have no right to the benefits of society who will not pay his club toward the support of it. Benjamin Franklin, letter to Robert Morris, December 25th, 1783.